Thanks for tuning in to part 3 with Kirstie Ennis on the Fish Bowl. This is all about the coolest stuff, in my opinion, that she does. The mountaineering with a cause, her example and activism for women and girls around the world, and just what makes her so awesome. And talking to a lot of the vets that work with Waterboys, which is how I met you, and they've served in the third world, and they know that perspective is probably easier to come by for y'all with losing somebody you went to war with seeing that family that didn't have clean water, that was dirt poor, and not just America dirt poor, like dirt poor. And does that help a lot? I mean, just encountering those things.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the more that you're exposed to third world countries or people who are truly struggling day in and day out, I think it's easy for me to look at my life and say, you know, well, this isn't that bad. Or for me to go over to other countries that I, go climb in now and see what those people are dealing with for prosthetic limbs or wheelchairs or wooden crutches. Like, I think because I've seen how bad it really can get, it's not as bad to me, like the things that I'm doing.
Why is that everywhere you climb, I mean, like the 7 summits, like a lot of these peaks surrounding these places are really economically depressed areas, or areas where you can learn a lot culturally, and like that's a big part of mountaineering, which full disclosure for everybody at home, like it's obvious to us, we met in 2016 climbing Kilimanjaro for our Waterboys Conquering Kili initiative, which is players and vets getting together. You do a lot of work with MVP, merging vets and players. It's a nice fit, and it's a lot of fun, but the side of it that I think most athletes take for granted, and maybe not the military folks, is that when you go there, you're going to see things that blow you away. What did you see in Tanzania, and what did you see when you were getting ready to give Everest a go? You're talking about doing Aconcagua, right?
I did Aconcagua.
You did Aconcagua. What do you see in those places?
I see gratitude for nothing.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes it so powerful. I mean, you're watching these kids that are 2 years old chasing a wrapper, down the street, a piece of trash down the street, and they're happy with that. Like, they are so grateful for anything that comes their way. Like, we saw it when we were bringing, water to some of these villages and stuff. And just something as simple that we have every day, have plenty of access to, like, that changes people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
And so, gratitude for the littlest things. I wish I woke up every day and say, you know what, hey, I'm thankful for these shoes and this dress, or, just everything that I have at my fingertips, and I don't. I should.
Yeah. It's tough because, like, you leave, like, when I go to Tanzania, and I know it's the same thing, it's like kids the same age as Waylon, who, my 3-year-old, like, are walking around, like, herding cattle and shit. Like, that's, like, their job. Like they grow up fast, and you see these water sources. You wouldn't go jumping and go swimming in these places. Animals are defecating in these water sources. There's algae, there's God knows what else, and there's film. There's gasoline film at one of the schools we worked at. Even though you see it, you leave 2 weeks later, you're back to being a complaining, whining little fucking American. and I do it too. How do you make that perspective last?
I don't know. I pick a handful of stories, like just people that I just sat down and was able to talk to, and I try to carry those home with me.
Yeah.
Like when I did Aconcagua, for example, became the first woman amputee to ever make it to the top. Pat on my back, felt great about it. But when I got to the bottom, there was a young woman that was an amputee, and she came up to me later and said, you've inspired me to attempt a summit next week. Yeah. So I take my necklace off and I give it to her. And so to me, like, obviously giving this gold necklace to, this young woman, she thought it was the greatest thing in the world because she's never going to have something like that. So it's like I try to pull those little memories and hang on to them. I try to write about them, and, it's hard for me not to look at little kids and like going in the stores and stuff, and they're kicking and screaming and crying because they're not getting what they want, and oh god.
Oh yeah, me, I'm tough on my boys, and because it's just like, man, like, you don't know how fucking good you have it. Like, don't throw your shoes. Like, some fucking kids don't have shoes. Like, what are you doing, dude?
Yeah.
But I've seen you, because you're a total hard ass. Like, you're not somebody you wanna be on the wrong side of going up a mountain. Like, you are super. You can be a hard ass on the mountain, and then we get down and you're dealing with kids, and you just melt. Yeah. And that's the cool duality of like redefining like what it is to be a tough person. Like, you can have that more vulnerable side, and you can have that sensitivity, which I think is really cool. And I've called you a Renaissance woman, but you're a lot more. You're you're really into women's empowerment. I mean, like you the first story you talk about at Aconcagua has to do with inspiring a young girl. I mean, Tanzania, sub-Saharan Africa, most of the burden falls on women and girls to go fetch this water. Dangerous treks, it's a gender issue. Do you look at yourself as an icon that can inspire young women? And who do you look up to?
I want to be an icon for young women. When I was in the hospital, part of my issue was I didn't feel like I had that role model. I want to be that for somebody else. I want young girls to look at me and say, hey, you know what? She's owning those scars because she loves the stories that they that they wrote or that they represent. Or, you know what? She's gone out and got 3 master's degrees and a doctorate, and she sits there and I push forward in a man's world every single day out in the outdoors.
And you've owned, you were in the body issue. You're the first vet in the body issue, which is scary as fuck to me. If they called me, not that they ever would, to be in the body issue, I'd have to eat nothing for 6 months. But you go out there and you kill it, and you're awesome. And I'm sure, people who have gone through struggles you inspire them, and young girls in general.
I was a part of the Good Old Boys Club for years. In the Marine Corps, I talked just as bad as they did and probably acted worse.
Right.
But I think being able to embrace those differences, that's going to be a game changer moving forward in society. I don't think everything has to be accessible, or I do think people have to truly make an effort to hold themselves to a higher standard, but I think inclusion's the direction that we need to go down, go towards. And
you've worked to include women in your fighting for the people who can't fight for themselves. You've worked to include people with disabilities. I mean, everything you do is very intentional and purposeful. Like you climb. You've tried Denali, you've tried Everest, you've done Kili, you've done Aconcagua. It seems like every time you're doing a really intentional cause to go with it. Can you talk about those causes and what you do with your foundation?
Yeah. Well, it definitely started with Waterboys. I absolutely loved what you were doing with, Kili and the Tanzanians, and I honestly kind of emulated what you had going on. And so all of my climbs.
Well, now I'm gonna get all mushy.
Oh no, but that's true. I loved, obviously I love athletics and endurance and adventure, but I don't want to go anywhere and beat on my chest and say, look at what I can do on my cool one leg. It's I want there to be purpose and passion and heart behind what I'm doing. So behind all of my climbs, I've dedicated nonprofits back here stateside, and then also helped nonprofits in whatever country that I'm climbing in. I created my 501c3, and it's real original. It's the Kirstie Ennis Foundation.
I like the name. It's got a ring to it.
Yeah. But that's really what it is. It's a means for me to be able to, support deserving nonprofits and provide education, opportunity, and healing in the outdoors. It's all volunteer-based. No one takes a dime or a salary from it. It just goes back to improving lives.
Would you rather be up at Everest Base Camp or somewhere at sea level, chilling with a beer at a campsite?
Base camp.
Yeah, that's why you're fucking crazy. I was scared for you when you were up at Everest, because I would be scared for just anybody. I used to want to do Everest, and Meg, who my wife, she was like, you're fucking kidding me. Do you want to die? What was Everest like? What's the scariest thing that people don't expect? Were there times on that mountain where you were terrified?
Yeah, and honestly, those moments had nothing to do with the mountain. The terrifying part of Everest is the people that show up there. Yeah. They're not checking someone's resume. I worked really hard to get to Everest. Everything was very strategic. How I trained, the prosthetics that I created for myself, the prosthetics that I made, for crying out loud. Everything was very strategic, and I worked hard to get there. But then to show up to the mountain, and there's people that have never even climbed before. People are putting crampons and teaching someone how to use an ice axe on Everest. That's an issue. No, serious. So it was super disheartening for me.
So it's getting, Everest is getting to the point where it is kind of not a joke, but the mountain's not a joke, but the way it's being handled is.
There's so much corruption over there with it.
What's going on with that? What's the corruption that somebody like me doesn't know? I see I see the pictures of people, the log jams, which can be frustrating on Kili, but it's not like you're going to die if you don't get off the mountain. What are they fucking up the worst?
So the wealthiest area over there is called the Kumbu, and it's because there's so much tourist traffic going in there and giving Sherpa the money. And money talks. These people, they have 10 kids each, and they have a wife and kids, or all those kids to take care of.
They get busy in the Himalayas.
Yeah. There's nothing else to do. You're hanging out inside.
Yeah. At high altitude.
Yeah. But And our money over there is just so valuable to them. $1,000 is going to get them through a whole year. So you come up, if somebody comes up and says, "Hey, here's 10 grand, you make, get me to the top," they're gonna say, "Okay,
yeah,
fine."
fuck it, I'll do it. Like
Yeah.
I stayed at Holiday Inn Express last night. Where were the farts worse, on Everest or Kili?
Kili, dude.
Because of the dudes that were
Yes. Well, the dudes and the things that you're eating. Oh man.
Hey, what's up? This is Bo Allen, Conquering Kili Class of 2019. I'm making this video in response to Fartgate. Some pretty intense allegations from Kirstie regarding how bad the farts were on Kili. In 2019, they were still pretty bad. And, I'm not going to name any names. I'm not a snitch, nothing like that. But I would like to state that I was part of the solution, not part of the problem. With unhuman levels of body control, mental focus. I didn't take a shit on that trip for 3 days, 4 days maybe, and I was stopped up. I was holding them in. I was zero farting. So, guys like Chris, Kels, Rob, Orca, they were the problem, all right? Your boy's part of the solution, all right?
The food was awful on Everest.
Really?
Yeah.
I saw one video of you which I know is hard for you because you're a competitor. You're like, I'm bowing out. The weather didn't cooperate.
Yeah.
It's so hard. You train for how long? And then you're on the mountain for how long before that happens?
Yeah. I trained for years for Everest, and then I had spent nearly 2 months on Everest. I spent a month above 6,000 meters, so a month taller than Kili.
Yeah.
For example,
That's the way you got to look at it, because when you get to the top of Kili, when you get to Kibo at 16,000 feet, you're like, this fucking sucks. I don't even want to spend a night here.
Yeah.
Remember the way we were?
Yeah.
You get to 19,341, you're like, we got to get down. Like, the highest altitude you got at Everest is what?
28,850 something.
And how much worse than Kili does that feel?
Oh, it's awful. Like, you have to trick yourself into taking another step, and your body is like eating itself. Like, you were saying,
Yeah.
when I showed up, you're like, "Oh, you look better than you did
You look
before."
healthy. I was like,
Yeah.
I thought you were gonna look like the 127 hours guy. Like you were just
Skeletor.
like sitting there and not eating for a while. I felt for you, but I was proud of you, and I just think it just takes a lot to take that on. I wanted to, before we get out of here, talk about what are we missing with vets? I mean, because the way I look at it is, vets aren't a charity case. They're a tool to make our society better, and they're more adept than us. They can do jobs with attention to detail and commitment and teamwork, and I feel like we fucked that up. Like, what are we missing with vets? Like, thank you for your service isn't enough. Like, what pisses you off? What do we need to do more of?
Well, I think the reality is, like you said, opportunity. Don't tell me thank you and it just be empty. Don't feel obligated to say thanks. You paid your taxes. You know what I mean?
Right.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
You're welcome. You paid my salary.
Yeah.
But on the flip side of that, like,
Oh, if they do that to football players, I pay your salary. If we did that to vets, I'm not going to use that one.
Yeah. But no, like, I just feel like people think, oh, well, she shot a 50 caliber machine gun for 6 years. Like, how does that translate? Well, there's actually a lot more. There's integrity and leadership and obedience. There's obviously judgment. There's, self-sacrifice, like overcommitments to, being able to be committed to like your mission. Like, there's so many things that people overlook. They just get so obsessed with what's face value, and they're
Right.
like, our veterans would be huge in our workforce, especially in corporate America.
Yeah.
Like, they would be able to make sound judgment, and like, I really do. I feel like they could totally revamp tons of businesses out there, but
Yeah.
I think our society is afraid of what I guess we might look like right now. Like post 9/11 vets, like whether you're Iraq or Afghanistan, like there is a stigma associated with that. I've been called a baby killer. I've been spit on. Your dad picked me up in Texas after I got put in handcuffs.
Yeah. I forgot to tell that story real quick.
The short version is I was sitting in first class, front row, and the woman behind me is popping off out her mouth saying that, if we went over there, that, we deserve what we got and this, that, and the other. And I don't care if you have that opinion, but be mindful of who's around you.
Right.
And I'm not going to take offense to it, but what happens if the woman across from me lost her son?
Right.
And that bothered me, and I took my seatbelt off, and I got up and said my mind, and the flight attendants were telling me to sit down, and we're on our descent, and yeah. Needless to say, I got escorted out of there.
Holy shit, I wish there was a viral video.
I'm glad
Everybody's
there's
getting
not.
a viral video these days on a plane. Like, why didn't you get your viral? So my pops picked you up.
Yeah, I was down there for Radio Row for the Super Bowl, and so
He
I
got
saw
you out of the bracelet?
I saw your dad, Jay Glazer, and There was somebody else there right off the bat.
You know
I was
what?
so
That's
rude.
one more time than my dad's got me out of handcuffs, so this is pretty cool. I got that going for me. Yeah. What's next for you? Like, it's in the crazy, you're a fucking lunatic adventure bucket.
Well, I'm actually going to go down to Ecuador in September and climb a mountain called Cotopaxi.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, same.
I'll be there too.
And again, to raise money for an organization called Range of Motion Project. But more importantly, we're actually going to be going down there and giving recycled prosthetics to underserved populations like amputee orphans and stuff.
Can you stop making me feel bad about my life?
Not the intention.
What about the English Channel?
Yeah, so whole other world of craziness outside of mountains. I want to swim the English Channel, 7 marathons, 7 continents, 7 days, which might be happening sooner than I anticipated. Yeah, and then I want to bike the Great Divide, so like 2,600 mile mountain bike ride.
I'd like to take a helicopter through the Great Divide. Yeah. You know what? My great aunt is the first woman ever to swim the English Channel, named
Really?
Gertrude Ederle. You got to fact check that. So if you do that, I'll be there. Can I ride the
Yes.
tugboat and like motivate you and like talk to you?
Because we screaming.
And you'd be like, "Shut the fuck up!
Yeah.
Leave me alone!" Like on the mountain.
No. No. That's kind of accurate.
Well, the last day was tough.
Yeah.
The last day was tough. Well, thank you for being here. And I'm very inspired by you, and I want to congratulate you. I'm very proud to have you associated with Waterboys and work with MVP, on a small scale along with what you've done. And so just one of the all-around good people in the sports and celebrity now industry. Thank you for being here, Kirstie. We appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate it.
And good luck
Chris.
tonight.
Thank you.
I'll be attentive during the speech.
I appreciate it.
Congrats, buddy.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you all very much for tuning in for this episode of the Fish Bowl with Kirstie Ennis. As you can see, she's much more than that badass Marine that you see on the surface. She is a very layered, intelligent, and intentional person with everything she does. Big fan of hers. Tune in next week.